So the claim by the London councilsman in the letter in the Financial Times today about affordable housing being built by councils, that is a totally false claim and misleading claim. And it is a claim made in denial of the reality of the role played by London councils, that is London borough councils, in creating the largest number of homelessness, evictions, and waiting lists. So I'm refuting the assertion made by the London council's representative writing in the Financial Times as published today, Tuesday, 8th of September, 2020. And I'm challenging him and the London councils to counter with substantiating evidence my refutation. Because I have been saying for years that local councils are out of order. And I've been saying it long time before the Conservatives, for a completely different purpose, have found the role of the councils that is something they can tamper with. And they can tamper with because they want to control the Labour voting areas by controlling the councils in those areas, because the areas like London have got more Labour controlled councils than Conservative control. And what the 12th of December 2019 election showed was that they got a large number of Labour voting parliamentary constituency seats turning to support the Conservatives. Of course, that support was obtained by tricks and lies and deceptions. And those people who, most of them, voted for the Conservatives for the first time in the previously Labour-controlled or Labour-held parliamentary seats areas are beginning to find out now that, or they have been finding out for the last 8 months, how wrong they were. And the current proposals, the Financial Times letter writer from the London councils actually refers to about the reform so-called by Robert Jenrick to planning and house building. This is something that the Conservatives are going to use to replicate, to repeat in the case of councils, what they did on the 12th of December 2019 by lying to the previously Labour voting constituents and electorates that they would deliver wonderful goodies. They haven't delivered nothing. And the same thing they're now going to say, that the current structures are a hindrance to Conservative control of councils. So they will be abolishing local councils. Now take this from this KhoodeelaarTV world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street, that Fleet Street will support this, and there is no voice in Parliament that will actually oppose the steamroller that the Tories are preparing to scrap local democracy altogether, or scrap the pretense or the remaining pretense of the local democracy altogether. And this will be because the local Labour councils are not democratically run and they are not democratically accountable. So what I said in part A, which was timed at 7:50 GMT. That was a mistake. It should have been 6:50 GMT. But that apart, the main thesis remains the same, which is that the fact that Roxana Fiaz happens to be the daughter of a Pakistani bus driver or any other kind of discipline is not relevant. But they make the point as a diversion because they don't talk about either Sadiq Khan or Sajid Javid or Roxana Fiaz delivering accountable service, a necessary service to the electorates, which is what they should be talking about. And I said in Taham, that's in the case of Lutfur Rahman, who was incumbent in that corrupt criminal post of elected mayor from late October 2010 until the 23rd of April 2015, when he was ousted by Election Commissioner Richard Morey. There has been no accountability to the local community from any of these post holders. And so therefore there is no real kind of affinity with these people or these post holders or these posts by the general electorate saying that these are important posts. So even these posts can be changed, they can be transferred, and the majority of the councillors' seats can be scrapped. Now, that may take some time, but that is already started in public. And so far, they have not been treated with the outrage that they deserve. The Labour Party has not been outraging and the electorate and the public, and it is not outraged itself. And what is happening is that the Daily Mirror is behaving like the Sun on the front page. This has nothing to do with the real issues of democracy, accountability that is lacking in the country. This is a complete pun, stupid pun on a stupid boys, based on Dad's Army. And these are the boys that had two Icelandic girls sneaking into the hotel room. So that's what they're talking about. It's not at all seriously about the lies that Boris Johnson has told and has been telling. They've reduced it to page 2 inside the Daily Mirror, and they're doing it in a kind of light. It's a criticism light touch. That's what they're doing. They're doing this as a tiny joke about Oven Reddy. They're not calling him a liar, and they're not giving the history of his lies, and they're not giving the history of the economic mess that the Tories have been creating while they are being allowed by the Fleet Street papers and the media to blame, quote, Labour for the mess that Labour leaves behind every time. And they're talking about players breaking rules by getting Icelandic girls into hotel. That's page 2 pages spread. And they've got also the same story on the back page, the sports page. So the Daily Mirror is out of order and out of control. And how they can be treated as seriously concerning themselves with the health crisis, the public health crisis, housing crisis, is not clear. Because what they have done there is a pun in a stupid boys on the front page, and the coverage of the pandemic crisis is only peripheral. And they're having again, soft touch kind of editorial against Boris Johnson lying about the withdrawal agreement. And of course, there is the usual piece about Meghan and Harry and the Manchester arena bomber, the jihadis. These are not issues that actually affect the majority of the people's lives and livelihoods, the NHS, and the rest of the service owed to the public by the government. And the Daily Mirror is not supporting the public, the democracy. And there is a piece on pages 18 and 19 about the Savoy Hotel. And it's not about the proletariat, it's about the ones with the money and the so-called celebrities. There is only on page 20 of the Daily Mirror is there a glimmer of the truth. And the glimmer is that that's what is happening. One pub shuts every 14 hours. Now that is dire, that is desperate for the business. And that shows that the economy is sick. But the Daily Mirror hasn't got a connecting narrative in anything. And the sick Daily Express, the legacy of lies left behind by Beaverbrook, is lying for Boris Johnson without any hesitation whatsoever. He's talking about not backing down, and this is the same issue that he is actually denying the withdrawal agreement that he signed. And that is the lack of connection with reality that the Daily Express serves, and it expects its readers, whatever the number of the readers may be, to be as unconnected, disconnected with the reality as the Daily Express is. And it says on the page 4 that no backing down. PM is defiant in the face of EU walkout threat. Now, it will not be the EU walking out because it's an agreement, it's a contract. It is a contract, and that is not something that is apparently clear to the Daily Express. Now, there is a piece here which is again the superficial concern about law and order and justice that the racist Daily Express has. It wouldn't be running this kind of piece if the mom were not white and were not from the same kind of background as they are used to accept as normal. And this story about the murdered girl's mom being ordered to kill her 40,000 pounds also shows the dysfunction of the judicial bureaucracy that I've been talking about. The judicial bureaucracy is in a mess. Just like the police was created in this country a good 100 plus years ago, the police that is now in its form, and it has not been really examined. The same case with the judicial bureaucracy. It's been going on for centuries, and there is no real audit or examination of what it does and what it doesn't, what it should do. So the councils are being scrapped by the Tories, and the councils themselves are unaware, they're asleep, because they are so asleep, so far gone into stupor of stupidity that they haven't even noticed this. And there is no outrage. I mean, this Financial Times letter from the London councils today about housing shows that they are only treating one thing at a time, tiny thing at a time, not the future of the councils of democracies, that they should be outraged about. And these two things are there in the same kind of package. The two Icelandic girls got into the hotel room, and the two footballers being disciplined for that. And then Matt to Hancock saying that young people are spreading the virus. So that's the headline, "Don't kill Grant." And the Birmingham killer of the weekend has been caught, and that is not something just the Express is running, it's all over the other papers. And Vanessa Feltz, who made news when she featured as one of the presenters and celebrities that caught one of Corbyn's kind of promoters on as being anti-Semitic or something like that. And this is the anti-Muslim racist Stephen Pollard, who's got a home now in the Daily Express as a columnist. Now, Pollard wrote a completely untruthful, and anti-Muslim rant in the Times. The Times has now removed my response to him from its website. And he also wrote in other publications, and I defended the target of his attacks, which were the Tower Owners Council, amazingly. I didn't defend them because I thought that they were honest, but I defended them against the false claim made by Stephen Pollard, who wrote a piece in the Times about 12 years ago or something like that. And that was the claim that the councils, then head of democracy, Williams, had made a kind of mess of things over circulating a circular to council staff and members not to let anyone or permit anyone eat during the month of Ramadan, anyone who is not a Muslim. And Pollard got it absolutely wrong about the list of allegations he published in the Times. So I immediately commented and published my post in the Times Online. And I said to him that John Williams, was not a dishonest person as he was saying. I didn't say that John Williams was not dishonest ever. I said that I had known him, and my view of him was not supported by the evidence that Stephen Pollard was citing. My view was completely different, and I did not support Pollard demonizing that particular person. And Pollard was particularly outraged, not because of John Williams' circular, but that Williams was a white person, a non Muslim, and he dared even take a considerable or considerate view of the Muslims fasting during the month of Ramadan, fasting and being entitled to some kind of discretionary respect by others. And the fact that Williams was imposed was accidental, because whoever would have been responsible for that kind of circular, whatever the circular actually contained, and if they were a white person, they would be condemned by Stephen Pollard, because the actual particular person who was the counselor in the in-post for the particular subject that dealt with that observance of the month of Ramadan during council office hours was a Bangladeshi Muslim. So Stephen Pollard was really outraged that a white person dared to carry out any instruction that helps the Muslim Bangladeshi post holder. So that was the line that was taken by the other racists operating in Tower Hamlets or from Tower Hamlets and were stringers to the Fleet Street organs or whatever. I shall devote a whole chapter, whole edition to Stephen Pollard and my intervention in support of the Tower Hamlets Council head of democracy. Because the same John Williams behaved against democracy and against my right to represent decent, objective, truthful, ethical opinion against the crooked way that the Tower Hamlets Council was doing its perpetration. So therefore, I had no reason to stand up for John Williams, but I did that out of characteristic kindness and universal generosity, and my dedication to uphold universal values objectively and put aside any other incident that I disagreed with John Williams on or with. John Williams has blocked me, for example, in 2012. That was a few years after I had actually stood up for him. He didn't have the capacity or the moral courage to stand up for himself against Stephen Pollard. So I did that. And years later, he blocked me from speaking to the council in September, I think, 2012, against the then Boundary Commission plot to reduce the number of councillors in Tower Hamlets Council, and also the plot against the dropping of the word Bangla Town. Again, on Bangla Town and the dropping of it, I shall devote a whole chapter and a whole edition of this broadcast. It won't be called Diagnosing the Media, but it will be called Diagnosing and Defending the Democracy that needs to be established in East London. And just as John Williams, I supported him despite his record and his behavior that was contrary to my having the right to speak to the council. So in the case of the name Bangla Town, I actually stood up for the retention of the name, despite the fact that when it was actually promoted in the 1980s, I organized a petition opposing the naming or renaming of the word with the insertion of Bangla town. And my ground was not against the word Bangla or Bangladeshi, but because I knew correctly, as vindicated, that the racists would actually use that to have an attack, have a go at the Bangladeshi community, which is exactly what racists, including the conservative councillor Peter Golds, used. And as I pointed out many times, Golds appeared on the Channel S, so called, and he was allowed to attack the campaigners for the retention of the word Bangla town. He compared them with campaigning for naming an area after kangaroos. So kangaroos are animals, so I respect them. But Peter Golds was not respecting kangaroos. He was actually demoting the Bangladeshis collectively to the level of what he thought was an animal level, which was to him a derogatory, ridiculous, and lower level than human beings deserved. So, this is my actual contribution. Even if I disagree with somebody, it doesn't mean that I would disagree with their universal rights. Even if I disagree with a particular agenda, which is totally condemnable on the lack of merit, and I am vindicated about that position, I still would defend those who support that idea if they are attacked by racists or people with other malicious motivation, which is what the likes of Peter Golds were and are. So Vanessa Feltz is talking about a trendy thing. Because she's not including the people, the majority of the victims of the care home ban and care home neglect and care home massacres. Most of the victims during the height of the pandemic in the first few months were African and Asian. And to this day, they have not been anywhere near adequately recognized. But this is the one about the relatives, and Vanessa Feltz is going by the flow of the trendy bourgeois ones, not about the majority of the victims being abandoned and allowed to be neglected and cruelly forgotten. And here on page 16 of the same Express, there is John Sargent, who is now adding his voice to the clamor for dropping license fee non-payment as a crime. And I think, having paid the television license for a very long time, that the BBC bureaucrats are responsible for discrediting the idea of publicly paid broadcasting network. Now back to Vanessa Feltz, who is also doing another one. And the headline is obvious. So I'm not going to elaborate on that one. And the fact that the BBC have been operating the collection of license fees as a criminal adventure against the license fee payers is bad enough. But the fact that they have been paying hundreds of millions of pounds of license fee payers money to celebrities and others is the biggest crime. I'm saying it. John Sargent is not saying it, but I'm saying it. And what is happening is that all these debates are artificial in the papers, and they never go deep enough, or they never go tell the truth. Now, this is a diversion. The dolphin says hello to a person in the middle of the sea or the waters. So that saves the Daily Express from being completely condemned or condemnable. Now, here is a piece for Ruxana Fias. The victims of scams against pensioners. It will come back to haunt her. The fact that Roxana Fias has been lying with lying council employees will come back to haunt her. And it will haunt her to her last days in career. And the people who have been hyping her up from politics home and on London, like Dave Hill on London, and others like Michael Gillard, who has done the overhyped promotion of her and her clique of 2013, who had been plotting against Robin Williams since 2013. None of those will be around when she needs rescuing, and Roxana Fias will sink without trace under the weight of evidence of her lying and collusion and complicity and her cruelty. Now, The Guardian is being absolutely typically Catherine Vanity. She's safe. She's playing like Ian Hislop on The Private Eye. He plays it safe, and she's playing it safe. She's not adding anything of substance in the headline. Brussels collapsing trust in PM. Now that is rubbish. They never had any trust in him. Brussels never had any trust in Boris Johnson for 20 years plus. Since Boris Johnson invented a quote against Brussels when he was there, allegedly filing for the Daily Torygraph, now Daily Borisgraph. So Brussels, of all places, has never had any trust in Boris Johnson. So how stupid and how detached from reality and how careless the Daily Guardian is. It should say that Brussels never had any trust in him. And they're saying in the inside page of The Guardian, page 9, the same thing, that business said that the deal is vital for business. Well, they don't have to say that, because what will happen, the necessity, the essentials, the pressures of market capitalism will exercise themselves and assert themselves, and Johnson, his cabal or whoever replaces him, will be forced to go back to some kind of deal. There is no other way, because a deal is needed by Britain as well as by the rest of the countries. And there is this piece about Johnson from John Crace, who is doing this at the expense of Gavin Williamson and Priti Patel and Matthew Matthew kind of Hancock. But essentially, John Crace, the so-called sketch writer, is focusing on Johnson, which is absolutely, totally factually correct, but he's not going far enough. And he's showing up some kind of differences between Matthew Hancock and Boris Johnson on all kinds of criteria and evidence. So there is in the Guardian. The Guardian is kind of going backwards, and it's going kind of minor. That is, its diminution of its stature as the so-called liberal daily is taking place at very speedy rate. There is nothing in the Guardian that talks about the day-to-day problems, the problems in the communities across the country, on housing, on poverty, on employment, on lack of public health, lack of democracy, lack of council accountability. There is nothing. So where do the people in Britain get any information about what is going on in their communities or in similar communities? So that's why the diagnosis is not just a word, it's a diagnosis of the sickness of the absence of journalism and reporting from Fleet Street and also from its followers. And as I have said, the absence of justice in the judicial bureaucracy is evident every day. And the judicial bureaucracy was set up, the courts were set up hundreds of years ago, and nothing has been changed. It has not been held to account. And it is way, way, way backward and far removed from the needs for remedies, judicial remedies, and everything, including the legal aid system and the licensed law trader status. These are all obsolete. Barristers are not needed. Solicitors are not needed in most cases. And the numbers of cases that are suppressed because of the absence of available or affordable, hireable barristers and solicitors is very high. And that is where the test is. The majority of the people who are denied justice and remedies are being denied that as part of the quote system. There is no way out. And so every area of life is being suppressed in terms of the access to courts. And we shall be talking about the articles, especially Article 6 and the right to fair hearing in detail in the due course. And the Sun is totally, absolutely bonkers and completely obsessed with rubbish. And they've got a writer called Utley. Olivia Utley sounds like Tom Utley, the Daily Telegraph writer, and his father. So it's an Utley being kind of slotted in by the Fleet Street papers, a family business. And they're praising Priti Patel. And they are condemning Michel Barnier and saying that, Boris, Boris Johnson says, I won't rip up agreement, but that's exactly what he's saying he will do. and the son is leading, not with the agreement being torn up by Boris Johnson, but with this Iceland girls being slaughtered into or sneaked into the hotel room by the two players. No sign that there is a crisis in this country, and there is no evidence whatsoever that there is any housing crisis, poverty crisis, or schools crisis. And the Boris Graph, who is the main paper, in-house paper for Boris Johnson, has been for the last 10 years, during which it has paid him millions of pounds on record and any amount off the record. And it is saying Boris Johnson is shamelessly saying that the very deal for which he made such big fuss made no sense. But that's what he was saying. It was the most sensible thing he was saying for months or even years. And then he said it never made sense. So he's brazenly lying, and the sick daily Boris Graph is shamelessly letting him lie instead of holding him to account for such a flagrant lying. And Camilla Tomini, as I have said, the most vicious right-winger on the Boris Graph papers, is making any excuse to justify Boris Johnson lying and doing the latest about turn and claiming that he never believed the withdrawal agreement made sense. So these are the papers that are feeding millions of people that are, or at least a few millions of British people that are buying these and reading these. These are the papers that are containing such lies, packs of lies, and their heads are full of lies. There is no alternative. There is no medium, either on radio or television, that actually even begins to challenge, let alone actually challenge the contents, the themes, the narrative. So this country is in darkness in terms of information, in terms of the truth, in terms of the evidence. And when the country is in darkness, it is the basic question to ask is, where is the light coming? Because there must be light. Otherwise, darkness is the end of it, So where is the light? And the light has to come from the people of consciousness and thoughtfulness, and people campaigning and fighting for democracy and fairness. No sign of that coming from the Labour Party. So we shall have to do our best to continue the questioning and the diagnostic evidential analysis in the next edition.